as the CSCMP Roundtable takes the summer break. We're going to continue forward with Logistics Manager Index, or LMI, with Zach Rogers, assistant professor of supply chain management at Colorado State University, and myself, John Graham, BM2 Freight. For those that don't know, Logistics Manager Index was new to me as well, but it's a great resource out there for transportation professionals, and that's what we're really kind of focus on today. Why would a third-party logistics company or people like myself find interest or find value in LMI? For me, my past, present, and future clients, they look to people like myself for ideas and solutions, and having that background of information that are relevant to the current market conditions, we can collaborate and meet those objectives that are outlined, through good discovery. Anyway, having said so much, bringing in, Zach, who is much smarter than myself. We've argued this before, but obviously he's the expert here. He's crunched the numbers and the data. Part of our, our Zach's Corner agenda is to really highlight what happened last month, what's being reported, what is trending. We can do some dialogue after the fact, but also make people that are watching this aware of, what is LMI, Logistics Manager Index, where to find it, and obviously some highlights and cliff notes for those folks. Well, I'm going to transition over here to Zach, let him kind of give you a little bit of background on LMI, highlights, we'll get into the questions. All right, Zach.
Great, thanks, John. And whether who's smarter, that's debatable. I do think we can say for sure that you have the cooler beard. So that's at least 1 point for you. So thanks for having me on and for continuing this during the summer. A professor in summer isn't always a lot of good to anybody. So it's nice to be coming out and actually doing something here. I want to talk here about the LMI and sort of what that is. So as John mentioned, it's Logistics Managers Index, and what you're seeing on the screen in front of you right now is pretty much what the survey is. And of course, we also ask about future movements in these metrics. We also ask demographic questions, but basically all we do with the LMI is we put together every month a change or diffusion index, very much based on what they do with the Purchasing Managers Index. In fact, we set it up with the guys from the PMI when we started this 5 years ago. And we look at 8 key metrics of supply chain. So inventory levels, inventory costs, warehousing capacity, utilization, and prices, transportation capacity, utilization, and prices. And we go and we ask, a couple hundred folks every month, you seeing more of this? You seeing about the same as what you saw last month? Or are you seeing less? We put all those together and we average them to create index scores for each of these metrics. And when we put them all together, we come up with an overall LMI score. And we've been doing this since 2016. We have about 5,300 people who have responded. People from all over the world, all kinds of companies. We got folks in $1 million companies. We got folks in $100 billion companies, and all kinds of different upstream, downstream retailers. We have people sort of chiming in from everywhere. And really what we do is we harness the wisdom of the crowd, right? If we ask enough people, you're hopefully bound to get a good answer. And so the way you read these charts, okay, the way you read our charts is that 50 is sort of the magic line, the line of demarcation. Anything below 50 tells you that we're having contraction. And the further below 50 it is, and it's a 0 to 100 scale, the further below 50 it is, the greater the rate of contraction is. Okay, it's a change index. These aren't showing you absolute levels. We're showing you the rate of change. Anything above 50, which can go all the way up to 100, that means growth. And the further above 50 we have, the greater the level of growth is. Here's a chart of the last 2 years of the LMI. And look at that, 75. That is the second highest reading we've had in the history of the index. There's only one other time we were higher than this. We had a 75.7 in like April of 2018. Remember, that was right after the tax cut and everything was super hot and there was all these build outs going. Now, everything slowed down kind of at the end of that year and in 2019. And I think we're not going to see a repeat of that. And we're going to get into that in just a couple minutes here. So anyway, we're at a 75. And what's different about this 75 than the 75 we had 3 years ago is this is coming on a run of high scores. You know, as you can see from this chart, the last 5 months in a row, we've been in the 70s. Anything in the 70s, that is pretty much almost an extreme level of growth, right? It's 20 points above the sort of median line. And these last 3 months together, April, May, and June, is the highest average 3-month score we've ever had. It's a 73 something. So Q2, the thing that just ended, Q2 of 2021, is the greatest rate of growth we have seen in the logistics industry in the 5 years that we've been doing this. And I would guess that some of the people out there in 3PL land are thinking, yeah, you know, that sounds like it could be right. This has been a pretty crazy quarter. So let's tease some of this out, okay? Because that's the overall metrics I'm giving you there. But let's tease out some of the key metrics I think from this month's report, and you can see them here in this graph. And now that black line in the middle, that dashed black line, that's right at 50, okay? So that's break even. So anything over that is growth, anything under it is contraction. And I think it's interesting to compare what's happening now in June of 2021 to February of 2020. The last month we had before the pandemic happened. And look at that. Let's see. So let's look at our capacity numbers. So the gray line's transportation capacity, the dark blue line's warehousing capacity, the two colors of my alma mater, the Nevada Wolfpack. I'm sure that's a coincidence that those colors got in there. And you can see both of them were growing at a moderate pace. Okay, 60 for warehouse capacity. That's actually a pretty good a good rate of growth. We wish we had that now. We are adding warehouses at a pretty steady pace. We had transportation coming online. I mean, remember, you know, at the end of 2019, early 2020, like fleets were shutting down. There wasn't enough business. And I mean, you think now that seems like a whole other, you know, century ago. But that's what was happening at the beginning of 2020. And you can also look at the associated costs that go with that. So the purple line here is inventory cost at 61. So pretty standard rate of growth, actually slightly below our average for this metric over the 5 years. And then I think the last one here is inventory levels. Inventory levels are actually down a little bit. They're contracting slightly. And that's a normal thing to see, you know, in a Q1 sometimes. You know, right after Q4, everything just happened, going down a little bit. That's just seasonal that we see that contraction there. Now let's go forward. Let's go forward the 16 months to June 21 and look at this. So warehouse capacity, the dark blue line, pretty much went negative immediately when COVID started. You know, there's a lot of that first month. I remember being jealous of people who were like, "Oh, I'm just at home making sourdough, watching Tiger King, la la la, having a great time." And I was like, I have never had more to do than I do right now. Who are all you people just watching the Michael Jordan documentary and getting in touch with your family? Not me. And so for warehouses, it was the same thing. Warehouses were immediately slammed because, you know, we have this flow of inventory, then suddenly everything smacks into a wall and it's just sitting there, right? So warehouses are interesting because they've never really had the relief that we saw in some other sections of the economy. And you can see that blue line has basically been, other than August of last year when we got a 50.5, so we were 0.5 into growth in August. Other than that, available warehouse space has been contracting for the last year. Now that's a crazy statistic, especially when you think about how many warehouses we've actually opened over the last year. It's just that demand has far outstripped supply. You know, you need more warehouses when you have more e-commerce, right? We need, especially if we're doing next day, same day delivery. And not only do we need more warehouses, we need more expensive warehouses that are like, you know, at suburbs of Denver and close to people's houses. It can't be out in the middle of nowhere like we used to have them. And so when they're getting more expensive, right? Last year, right? We need more warehouses for e-commerce. Last year, e-commerce grew by 40%. Normally it grows by 15%. So it grew about 3 times faster than it should. And the thing is that's not a one-time bump, right? It's not like we went up and then we're coming back down and be okay. No, it went up and it's going to keep going up. Even after that 40% spike from last year, e-commerce is only about 13.8, 13.9% of total retail sales in the US. By 2025, it'll be 26% of retail sales in the US. So it's essentially going to double again over the next 5 years. We're going to have somewhere around 330 billion square feet of warehouse space added in the US if we're going to keep up, okay? If we're going to see this little blue line go back above the dash line there to the point where we're not stressed on warehouse space, that's the sort of build outs we're going to need. And warehouses take a while to put up. You can't just have them there tomorrow. Transportation, we see a very similar story. After a quick peak in April and May, when everything was totally shut down, transportation capacity has disappeared. All right, it has totally disappeared. Right now, we have a record backlog for Class 8 truck orders. We're held up for a number of reasons, one of them being semiconductors, and then a bunch of other components. John, this is true. I took my car into the shop yesterday morning because the air conditioning broke, and I've got a hose. I got a hose that's leaking, and the guy was like, it's going to be 4 to 5 weeks before the hose gets here. And if anyone was wondering if the 4 to 5 weeks of the year, of July to early August are the time you don't want to have air conditioning, it is not. It is not when you don't want to have air conditioning. So I'm just driving around town with all the windows open, trying to go as fast as I can to
maybe get one of your students' scooters or mopeds or something. Just let the breeze cool you off.
Honestly, I am actually riding my longboard around school just to
There you go.
So anyway, so we're in the hole, right? For both trucks and warehouses in terms of available capacity. And just like with warehousing, we've been bringing them on. Fleets have added in the first 6 months of this year 42,000 trucks to fleets just in the US. 42,000 trucks, and yet we see that gray line continue to be below the black line because we just can't keep up, right? We just can't keep up.
Well, that and the drivers to sit in the trucks. There's probably a lot of fleet owners out there that are wishing they had drivers for those trucks that they have.
Oh, absolutely. We don't. There's the driver shortage, and hey, look, if you have a job where one of the main appeals of it is freedom of the open road and driving around, you and Clint Eastwood and a monkey, just having a great time, and then suddenly you put ELD in every truck and every single move you make is tracked. I mean, some trucks now, there's a camera. If the driver looks at his phone too many times, he's going to get a mean message from the home office. So, and the clearinghouses and all this stuff. It's interesting, by the way, John, we actually added 24,000 trucking jobs last month. It's just none of them were long haul. A lot of them, some of them were in production, and production of trucks is actually ramping up. We'll see that on the next slide, or maybe 2 slides. And some of them are short haul, but you can't get long haul. You can't get anyone to do long haul.
Yeah, the local fleet drivers, great job. You're home every night. Regional, maybe one overnight. Yep. Again, a little bit better, right? You're not, you're home on weekends basically. But the long haul stuff. And I don't know if Clyde would have, would have made it through the clearinghouse. I think he.
I bet not.
Actually,
I don't know how many truck drivers from 1978 would have been good on that. Honestly,
pre-deregulation era, or right there anyway. Oh man, well, cool stuff. So really a question, with e-commerce, right, and all of us, with the accelerated getting products at home, with retail space being closed, obviously we've all seen, that kind of stay. And I think we've talked about it in the past, maybe like a 25% increase in, e-commerce. Do you see that as an indicator in what's happening with warehouse space and having products closer to, or when I say warehouse space, meaning increased inventories, or warehouse space that's closer to consumers, maybe closer to city metros where people can get their, obviously maybe not coolant lines for your 1985 Ferrari Testarossa.
Exactly what it is. It's bright pink. Hatchback.
It's a classic automobile.
Yeah.
But you get my point, right? Do you see that as an issue for warehouse space, or is it
Absolutely.
okay, or probably one of the triggers?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because everyone's looking for the same infills. Like, oh, is there any old Kmart's that are gone that we can put a distribution center in? And there's only so much of that. I mean, there is a lot of old store. We closed down 12,000 retail stores last year, but that's still not really enough, and it's not the right kind of stores and stuff. I actually think that you're seeing a lot of old malls turn into distribution centers, old big box stores, all kinds of stuff. It's still not really enough though, especially when you think about the competition is over the next year to 10 years, really the competition is really going to be for same day delivery, right? That's the normal metric we're going to be at. I tell my students sometimes that I used to order my textbooks and you could pay extra for them to get there in 7 days instead of 10. And they're like, 7 days? Like it's like I just told them that, I rode a horse to school. Like they don't understand they don't understand that concept. And in terms of the inventory that you bring up, I think the most interesting part to me of this graph is how relatively flat the yellow line is. I mean, it's up, right? It goes up quickly in the first couple months because we had that buildup of inventory. But if you look over the last year, inventory levels haven't actually increased that much. But inventory costs have, and generally over the 5 years we've been doing this, that yellow line and that purple line, which is inventory costs, those kind of track together. And they're not tracking together right now. And what that tells us is that the costs of inventory are high, partly because of warehousing and transportation, but also because you're spending a lot on inventory, but it's not staying in the same place. And essentially what this tells us, what these two lines together tell us, is right now we have a very high volume of inventory moving through the system at a really high rate of velocity. And that's backed up by the inventory, the inventory sales indices that the Fed puts out. If you look at the retail inventory to sales numbers from April of 2020, it was 1.67, which is, I think, the highest it had been since 1995. Basically, that said, okay, so for every sale we're making, we have 1.67 units of inventory. April 2021, which is the most recent data we have, it was 1.07, which is the lowest it's ever been in the more than 30 years they've been tracking it. That's the lowest that number's ever been. And so we have this whiplash of it went down 0.6, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when the highest it's ever been is 1.6, that is kind of a lot. And so, and for some industries like auto industry, it's a 0.76, meaning that for every sale they make in the auto industry, they have 0.76 units of inventory, which obviously is not that sustainable of a model. And so things are moving through and cycling really, really quickly at this fast pace. And it's not low because we don't have inventory, because actually, if you look at inventories that companies are holding, right, inventories in April 2021 are actually about 2 or 3% higher than they were in April 2020. It's the sales side, which is about 50% higher than it was in April 2020, that's really driving it. And so basically everything is moving really, really fast. Things are very hot. And to your point, John, e-commerce is a huge part of it. And I think there's some evidence of that when we look at our comparisons between upstream and downstream firms. Downstream firms, which are represented by the orange bars here, are like retailers. It's folks that are close to the end consumer. The blue bars are upstream firms, manufacturers, 3PLs, carriers, things like that. So look at the difference between warehousing prices and warehousing utilization. And actually, I ran some sort of nerdy, t-test, significance test of these, and there's a significant difference that you can see down at that graph at the bottom. So normally utilization and prices go together, right? If you're utilizing more of the warehouse, that means there's higher demand, prices are going to be higher, okay? Yet, for upstream firms, we see a significantly higher, 17-point higher about, rate of utilization. And for downstream firms, we see about an 18-point higher price growth. So why do we have that disconnect? Why do we have that disparity? Well, it's because the upstream firms, your 3PLs, your manufacturers, your warehousing companies, they're holding a lot of inventory upstream, right? And so where is it going to bunch up? It's going to bunch up away from the consumer. And so much inventory is coming in so quickly, and that you get that really fast turnover, that they're having to use every square inch they can possibly find. Downstream, okay, these are retailers. A lot of them are e-commerce retailers. Those warehouses, and this is exactly what you're saying, John, are in the most expensive places where warehouses are, right? That's where you have your pricey warehouses. And so they are growing. Warehouse prices for e-commerce and for downstream retailers is growing at such a fast rate, even though most of the inventory is still moving through upstream. The other place you see a significant difference is in transportation capacity. Upstream is 28, downstream is 39, about an 11-point difference. And now those are still both extreme rates of contraction, but upstream is really extreme. Okay, it is almost impossible. And you see this, right? We have anecdotes about fireworks and agricultural products, electronics, furniture. It is so hard for OEMs and manufacturers to get products to consumers. And it's because of that number right there. It's sitting at a 28. That is an insane rate of contraction.
So, quick question here. Just, with the increased inventories, you feel like with the velocity, you feel like you're setting yourself up for negative effects of the bullwhip effect, right? Is that the lesser of two evils, not having inventory or
Right.
having too much of it? Because obviously, if you don't have the inventory, you can't sell. If you don't have an item, so you can't sell an item. If it's on the shelf, you can't sell it. But at the same time, having the product in the wrong place where the consumers aren't buying, I feel for all the demand planners out there. I mean, this has to be just an impossible scenario, but you're going to have to make some decisions there. So I feel like to me, this is an interesting, as we try to hypothesize what, the future is going to be. When I say future, maybe Q1 next year, how that's going to affect, with inventories. Is that something we should be tracking as we look into answering that question?
So here's what I would say. It's very dependent on the industry. So look at toilet paper from last year. There was a huge bump. Remember that like the 6 weeks of insanity about toilet paper, and I was getting media requests from all over the place, like, when will there be enough toilet paper? And by the time we hit like April and May, because everyone went out, like 7 a.m. at Target, elbowing each other, trying to get it. And then by May, everyone had enough. And now all of those producers, your Kimberly-Clarks, your Georgia Pacifics, they have way too much, because they like moved industrial capacity over to residential capacity. They're really bumping up production. And so, yeah, that was the exact bullwhip effect, right? The idea of the bullwhip, for those of you who aren't familiar at home, it's like when you do a whip, you don't have to move your wrist that much, okay? Your wrist is the consumer demand for the whip to be all over the place out here, right? That's production, okay? Indiana Jones goes like this, and then the whip goes insane. So for things like, I don't know, lumber, electronics, or trucks, I think, like, let's focus on Class 8 trucks for a minute. So we're about 400,000-ish, 300,000, 400,000 Class 8 trucks in the hole on back order right now. We're probably, last year, I think we were able to produce 210,000. So that's obviously, we got to ramp up production. This year we'll get, in the higher 200s. Next year we'll be over 300,000. So we're ramping up production. Now, you could ask, okay, well, will we need 300,000 trucks every year? Well, if it was something like toilet paper, I would say no, because that was a one-time spike, went away. Trucks, what did we just say at the beginning of this talk? E-commerce is going to be 26% of all retail within the next 4 years. So we will need more trucks. And so for something like that, yes, we do have to ramp up production, increase inventory, but I think the demand will still be there to support that in a couple of years. That's less likely to be a bubble. things like workout equipment last year, or sourdough starters or toilet paper, those were bubbles. And so it takes awareness of the industries, right, to be realistic with themselves and say, hey, you know what? If you're Peloton and you got the craziest, you have insane back orders right now, you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, look, we're probably not going to grow 30% every year for the next 5 years. I mean, we'll grow. You know, people love the commercials where the nicest window of the nicest room in your house is where you put your exercise bike, and whatever fantasy that is they have. But it's unlikely we're going to grow 30% every year.
Yeah.
If you're producing electric engines for truck fleets,
and maybe
or
that's
Amazon
why
delivery
they're
vans,
and maybe that's why
then
you're seeing slow times for delivery now, because they're like, we're not going to speed up production,
mhm,
right? Just for the fact that we're going to be over inventory,
that's
at
exactly
some
right.
point.
Yeah,
And I'm
they're
sure they
smart
built
over
that
there.
to last a little bit more than a year or two. People aren't
They're
going to.
smart over there. Yeah. No. Now, did the marketing department make a commercial that seemed like a woman was in a hostage video? Yes. But the production people know what they're doing over there at Peloton. Now,
Good example.
you could look at this thing. You could look at this and you could think, gosh, so what are we going to do? Because like I said, we're in a hole. And basically, we went forward in terms of our need for trucks and warehouses for e-commerce. We skipped forward about 3 years and 9 months down the demand curve from where we thought we would be. So it's going to take us a while to dig out of it. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, one of the things we ask people is, okay, in the future, where do we see this going? And here's the future numbers. And you can see it's still pretty robust growth, especially for prices. Inventory costs 85, warehouse price 84, transportation costs about 79. Those are steep rates of growth. The thing, though, that gives me a little bit of hope in terms of us being able to catch back up, something that I haven't had for a while, are the capacity numbers. Transportation capacity, warehouse capacity, both those numbers are up by 10 points from last month. And transportation capacity is positive. Transportation capacity is positive for the first time in a long time, our predictions for transportation. And so that gives me a little bit of hope. And you can even look at predictions for truck manufacturing, and we are going to add a whole bunch of production capacity over the next few years. And we're seeing, I mean, with shipping, my gosh, over 500 million TEUs of shipping capacity have been ordered. Now, those will take about 3 years to get online, but they will get online.
Yeah.
And in 300 billion square feet of warehouses, that'll take a while, but that'll come online too. And so we're starting now to adjust our supply chains to the new reality that we have to deal with. You know, consumers
Like that.
are already living in a post-pandemic world, right? We're ordering things online. We expect quick delivery, quick turnaround, big selection. Supply chains are still in a pre-pandemic configuration. And so when we're going to see relief, if I'm a 3PL, if I'm a trucking company, if I'm a carrier, is when the structure of supply chains catches up to the post-pandemic reality that consumers are already sort of existing in. That's not going to be the next 12 months. 18, 24, though, by the time we get into 2023, I think we will start to see the supply and demand curves meet up into a place where we have some equilibrium.
Yeah. It's funny. It always finds a way to balance itself out, right? And I think if I put you on the spot for a bold prediction, when do you see that for transportation markets, for that to kind of the tipping point? Because we can all agree that prices are probably inflated right now.
Yes.
When do you see that? When do you see the market pricing start to drive down?
I think we might be near the top in terms of rate of growth.
Yeah.
Okay, so the absolute number might still keep going up. I think the curve is starting to flatten, right, in terms of the rate of increase. Now, you have to adjust that for seasonality, of course. I mean, this is Q2. I mean, Q4 it might pick up. But seasonally adjusted, I would think the curve's starting to flatten out. That being said, it's not going to be the next 12 months, right? We are not going to have, I mean, you see these rates of growth. And by the way, our future predictions have been about 90% accurate from our, and again, this isn't us, this is our respondents, right?
Yeah, bold predictions, 90%.
Yep.
I like it.
90%. I mean, they're pretty good.
They're
We love our respondents on the LMI. So I would guess 2023 is when we're going to see it. You know, I think it's going to be hectic all the way. I think Q4 21, Q4 22, they're both going to be tough. I don't know if they'll be as tough as Q4 20 was, but I have a feeling they'll still be hard. I think by the time we come around the bend into 2023, start getting into the middle of that year, I think by then we'll have had enough time for our necessary logistics infrastructure to have been built up to a point where supply still won't be matching demand exactly, but it'll be at least hopefully in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, trucks are going to be delivered. Drivers, we're going to start recruiting the right types of drivers in quantities. What was I going to say? Warehouse space and logistics solutions will probably, you know, all kind of collaborate together to bring some sort of balance, right? Or shift back to I guess another new normal, but probably one that's a little easier to operate in, or supply chains to operate in, right? I feel like today, you know, the supply chains are relying on transportation to solve a lot of their problems, which we all know that's very expensive, but also not very consistent either, or sustainable for that matter. So I think everyone's waiting for that, you know, on both sides, both the shipping community as well as the transportation community will like it to calm down to make it a little bit easier to operate in, for sure.
Well, and you know, I think this is really helping people. You know, you don't know what you got till it's gone. I really think that's true. And I think this crisis, if you want to call it that, this issue, these disruptions, are helping us to understand just how amazing supply chains actually are. You know, I had somebody, I was talking to a reporter from St. Louis, and he was saying, you know, the firework guys around here are like, how come we don't have fireworks? You know, why can't they just ramp up production and get it to us faster? And I was saying, you know, 99% of the fireworks come from China. And we went through all of our backlog last year when we all have fireworks at home. And, you know, the fact that you can make, you know, a little pack of M80s in central China, put them on a train, get them on a boat, float it thousands of miles across the ocean, get it on another train, get it on a truck, and be at a fireworks stand in rural Missouri where you can sell them for $5 and make a profit. That's a magic trick. I mean, that really is an incredible thing. And the fact that it's not working perfectly right now, I think shows just how impressive supply chains are, how creative they are, how resilient they are. And that more than anything gives me confidence that we are going to come through on the other side of this, and that, you know, we'll figure it out, and we'll be able to do our magic trick again pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll call these the good old days, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Remember when we only had to do next day delivery? Man, those were great times.
Oh, you had to wait. You had to wait 12 hours for a delivery. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's
Awesome.
just like the people who lived through the Depression. Yeah, same.
Well, I was gonna say, so everybody that's watching, LMI comes out on the first Tuesday of every month.
First Tuesday of every month. Even if that first Tuesday is July 6th and you have to spend your whole day off writing it on a Monday, it'll still come out.
And the website www.the-lmi.com.
Yes, sir. Yep. And you can see all of our old reports are up there. You can have them for free. This isn't a great business model by us. You just can have them. And there's also a link to take the survey if you think you'd be qualified and helpful for us on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good call out there. Well, I think this wraps it up for this summer edition, but stay tuned, folks, for the next summer edition next month to correlate with the August updates. So we'll be sure to update as well. Thanks all for listening. Thank you, Zach, again, for all your insights and hard work. Greatly appreciated.